Welcome back to another deep dive. Remember our look at the Jamaican agricultural market a few weeks back? Prices were all over the place, but ultimately kind of balanced out.
Right.
Well, hold on tight, because the new data, February 14th to the 21st, shows this market's still got some surprises up its sleeve.
Yeah, this is a textbook case of volatility. Even with a slight overall dip, prices down about 2.24% across 53 commodities, we're seeing some wild swings.
Yeah.
The volatility index is sitting at a pretty hefty 34.64%.
Okay, gotta stop you there for a sec. For those of us who don't speak market, what's a volatility index of 34.64% actually mean, and why should we care?
Good point. Think of it this way. The volatility index, it measures how much prices are jumping around. Like a heart rate monitor for the market. The higher that number, the more unpredictable the price movements. And a high number like this, well, it means predicting future prices is a real headache. It's a wild ride for everyone involved. Farmers planning their crops, distributors managing stock, even folks at the grocery store trying to budget.
So basically, hold on tight, folks. This roller coaster ain't slowing down. Let's get into the specifics. We know there's been a dip in prices overall, but some items have been hit hard. Honeydew melon, for instance, down a crazy 25%. That's an average price of just $698.63 per kilogram. Ouch. Can't imagine what that means for the farmers.
Yeah, a 25% drop like that can make or break a season for honeydew farmers.
Well,
Raises the question, what's behind this? Too much supply? Quality issues maybe? Or have people's tastes changed? Are they choosing other fruits?
it's like a mystery we gotta solve. And honeydew's not alone. Yellow sweet peppers down almost 15%. Green cabbage too, close behind at a 14% drop. Is this a sign of things to come for the whole veggie market?
It's possible. Could be we're seeing a bumper crop, good weather maybe, leading to too much supply and pushing prices down. Gotta consider other things too though, like are there more imports coming in?
Okay, so maybe not the best news for those in the honeydew, sweet pepper, or cabbage business. But it can't be all bad news, right? There have got to be some items fighting back, even seeing some price jumps.
You're absolutely right. Onions, for example, up over 7%, hitting an average of $590.77 per kilogram. Pretty impressive considering everything else is down. Makes you wonder, what's driving that onion demand?
Yeah, what is going on with those onions? And it's not just onions. Broccoli's climbing too, almost 3%. Even Negro Yam has a small gain, over 2%. What's the story with these winners?
Well, maybe we're seeing people changing what they like to eat, choosing these veggies for their nutrition maybe. Or maybe they're just looking for cheaper options when everything else is getting expensive.
So maybe these price increases are a clue to how people are changing their diets. Now let's zoom in on the regions. This is where things get really interesting, right? Because Jamaica is not just one big market. Each region has its own unique story to tell.
Exactly. Take St. Catherine, for example. It's a big agricultural hub, so lots of produce, right? And we see that a moderate supply overall. But here's the thing. The prices are all over the place, up and down, impossible to predict.
So even with enough produce, St. Catherine producers are facing a real challenge. Trying to keep up with those changing prices must be a nightmare for planning. Now, what about Kingston and St. Andrew? How do things look there?
Well, Kingston and St. Andrew are all about retail and wholesale, more focused on getting the produce out there than growing it. We're seeing a different pattern there. There's still volatility, but prices are actually coming a bit more stable compared to the last few weeks.
So different parts of the supply chain, different price behavior, makes sense. What about the other regions? Any standouts in terms of supply and demand?
Let's look at St. Mary. Overall supply is classified as fair, so pretty balanced. But if you look closer, certain things, like those onions we talked about, are actually pretty scarce in St. Mary.
Ah, so that scarcity could be why onion prices are going up. Supply and
Awesome.
demand, right? Okay. How about Manchester and St. James? What's happening in those regions?
Manchester's a bit of a puzzle. We're seeing fair supply across the board, but certain things, like broccoli and Negro Yam, are seeing prices go up. Looks like Manchester might be benefiting from a mix of good local demand and healthy production levels for those specific items.
So maybe Manchester's becoming the place to be for those in the broccoli and Negro Yam business. All right, last but not least, let's check out St. James. What's the situation there?
Scarce is the word for St. James. Supply levels are way lower there than in other regions.
So limited supply in St. James, high demand for things like onions and other places. I'm sensing an opportunity here.
You got it. These regional differences create what we call arbitrage opportunities. Savvy distributors can buy low in areas with too much and sell high where things are scarce.
So that's where those supply chain experts come in. But for the rest of us, what does all this mean? What are the key takeaways? Whether you're a farmer, a business owner, or just someone trying to shop smart, what should we be thinking about?
That's the million-dollar question. And it's what we're going to dig into right after.
Oh, we're actually out of time for today. But don't worry, we'll pick this up next time and explore what it all means for you. Stay tuned.
All right, so we've seen that the Jamaican agricultural market, well, it's not exactly predictable. Prices are up and down, regions have different needs, and those who adapt quickly, well, they're the ones finding opportunities. But before we get lost in the current craziness, maybe it's good to step back a bit. Remember that briefing document we had, the one summarizing trends from February 7th to 14th?
Yeah, I remember that.
Could looking back at that data help us figure out what's driving this week's market?
Absolutely. Context is everything. Looking back can help us see patterns, maybe even some of the triggers for these shifts we're seeing now.
Okay, so let's rewind a bit. What were the big stories in the market that week?
Well, the first thing that jumps out, the market was even more volatile then. The volatility index was 41.4%. That's higher than this week. It was a wild ride. And the overall average price change was negative, about negative 1.17%. But some individual items saw some really big swings. Right, it wasn't just a slow decline. Some items had some dramatic price changes. What were some of the biggest winners and losers that week?
Tomatoes, for example.
Okay.
Both the salad and the plummy varieties, they took a real hit. Their prices dropped by over 30%. The report said it was probably because of too much supply. Too many tomatoes, not enough buyers.
Ouch, that's tough if you're a tomato farmer. But there must have been some items doing well, right?
Oh, yeah. Cantaloupe was the star, with a 51% price increase. That's great news for cantaloupe growers. Green sweet peppers and gungo peas saw good gains, too.
Wow, 51%. Makes you wonder what was driving that cantaloupe demand. Okay, so we've got this picture of the market from a week ago. High volatility, tomatoes crashing, cantaloupe booming. Now back to this week. Do you see any connection between those earlier trends and what's happening now?
Actually, yeah. It's pretty interesting. Take honeydew melon, which is down the most this week. It wasn't even mentioned in the previous week's analysis. No significant price changes then.
Good catch. So whatever's causing this honeydew drop, it's a recent development, something unexpected. It's like there's a whole other layer to this market story. Something happened between those reports that changed everything for honeydew. What do you think it could be?
It's definitely intriguing. We can speculate, of course. Maybe a bunch of imported honeydew suddenly flooded the market. Or maybe something local, like bad weather, damaged a lot of the crop, leading to a shortage.
Right. It could be natural or something with the supply chain. Tough to say for sure without more info. Now, what about onions? They weren't a big deal in the previous week's data either, but now they're leading the price increases. Does this suggest some kind of shift happening?
It's possible. Maybe those same factors that drove up cantaloupe and sweet pepper prices a week ago are now affecting onions. Maybe people's tastes are changing, or maybe some of the supply chain problems that were hitting other crops have now moved to onions.
Like a chain reaction, but instead of atoms, it's prices and produce. One change can impact the entire market. This is why this historical data is so helpful, isn't it? It helps us connect the dots and see the bigger picture. Okay, so we've made some interesting connections between the 2 weeks. But what about specific regions? Do you think the regions that were struggling with too much supply or not enough last week, are they still facing those same issues?
Let's see. Let's start with St. Mary and St. Thomas. Both had scarce supply last week.
Right, so not enough produce, which usually means higher prices for shoppers. Did those regions manage to fix those supply issues?
Looks like those challenges haven't gone away completely. Both regions still have supply constraints, although St. Mary's overall supply is a bit better now, up to fair.
Okay, so a little bit of improvement in St. Mary, but those supply problems are sticking around. Do you think this could be contributing to those price increases we're seeing in some things? Like, those onions?
Definitely. When something is scarce, the price usually goes up, like we're seeing with onions. It's probably playing a role in other commodities, too. Now let's look at the other side. Regions like Clarendon, Manchester, St. Anne, and Portland, they had too many tomatoes last week.
Right, a tomato overload. Too many tomatoes, not enough people buying them. How are those regions doing this week?
Well, the tomato situation hasn't really improved. Both plummy and salad tomatoes are still among the biggest price losers this week.
So, too many tomatoes and low prices are still a problem. It's amazing how much we can learn just by looking at 2 weeks of data.
It really shows how important it is to track these trends over time. But remember, The data is just the beginning. The real value is in understanding what it all means and how we can use it to make better decisions.
Okay, we've talked about all these interesting trends and connections, but let's bring it back down to earth. What does this all mean for the average person? What are some things they can actually do with this information?
One big lesson is the importance of diversification. For producers, especially those focused on one crop, these market changes can be devastating. Growing different crops can help protect them against those unpredictable price swings.
Don't put all your eggs in one basket, right? If one crop fails, hopefully others can help. Are there any specific commodities producers should be looking at right now based on what we're seeing?
Well, based on this data, onions and broccoli seem to be doing well. There's demand for them, and the prices are holding steady or even going up. But remember, this is just a snapshot. The market can change fast.
Right, it's not a crystal ball, but it's a good guide for navigating this ever-changing landscape. Now, what about those producers who are really invested in tomatoes? They're facing some tough decisions, aren't they?
Yeah, it might be time to think about finding new markets for their tomatoes, or maybe processing them to add value. They could even adjust how much they grow to match the current demand.
So, being adaptable is crucial in a market like this. Okay, we've talked about producers. What about the people who distribute the food? What are some key takeaways for them?
For distributors, being flexible and quick to react is key. They need to optimize their supply chains to handle those fast price changes. For example, they could take advantage of those arbitrage opportunities, moving produce from areas with too much to areas with not enough.
Right, being the produce matchmaker, connecting those with too much to those in need. What about pricing? How should distributors price their products when the market is so volatile?
They need to have flexible pricing strategies that take into account the changing market conditions. It's a balancing act. They need to stay competitive, but also make a profit.
So they need to be good at market math and have a good gut feeling. Okay, we've talked about producers and distributors, but let's not forget the most important people in all of this. The consumers. We're the ones who create the demand, right? So what can we do to navigate this market effectively?
That's right. Consumers play a big role. First, stay informed and pay attention. Keep track of price changes, read those market reports, and see what's happening locally.
So knowledge is power when it comes to grocery shopping. I like that. But knowing prices are changing is one thing. What can consumers actually do with that information?
Well, they can use that knowledge to make smarter decisions. Like, if honeydew melon's price is dropping, buy some and make some smoothies. But if green cabbages are getting expensive, maybe try something else, like Cantaloupe or pak choi.
Right. Be flexible, try new things, and you might even find a new favorite along the way.
Exactly. The Jamaican agricultural market is dynamic and connected, and every decision impacts the whole system. By understanding how it all works, we can make choices that benefit everyone.
Okay, we've covered a lot, but there's one more important question. Why does all of this matter to the average person? Why should they care about the Jamaican agricultural market? It's not just about numbers, right?
You're right, it's much bigger than just economics. This is about people's lives, about having enough food, and about Jamaican culture and identity.
It's about the farmers who work hard to feed the nation, the people who bring fresh produce to our communities, and the families who share meals made with local ingredients.
Understanding this market helps everyone make better choices, whether it's about what to plant, what to buy, or where to invest. It's about creating a stronger and more sustainable agricultural sector that benefits everyone.
So it's not just about individual choices, it's about contributing to a bigger vision for a thriving agricultural sector in Jamaica. All right, before we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave our listeners with something to think about. We've seen those price increases in onions, broccoli, and Negro Yam. They're going up while most prices are going down. Could this be a sign of something bigger? Are people starting to prefer healthier, locally grown produce?
That's a great question, and it's definitely worth thinking about. Is this a temporary thing, or are we seeing the start of a new trend? Are people becoming more aware of where their food comes from and the impact of their choices?
Or could it be that farmers are adapting, meeting those changing demands, and trying new growing techniques?
That's a really interesting thought. Maybe farmers are responding to those changing preferences by growing more crops that are seen as healthier and more sustainable. Or maybe they're finding new ways to grow these crops, which leads to more food and better results.
So many possibilities. It's something that needs more investigation. We encourage everyone to keep digging, stay curious, and never stop learning about the Jamaican agricultural market. We'll be back soon with another deep dive into a new topic. Until then, stay informed, stay engaged, and keep exploring. We've really dug deep into this week's data for the Jamaican agricultural market, and wow, there are some interesting takeaways here. It's clear this market is like a living thing, always changing, where prices go up and down based on supply and demand, and those regional differences add a whole other level of complexity.
We saw honeydew melon prices plummet, onions becoming the star, and tomatoes struggling to find a place with all that oversupply.
We talked about how this volatility affects everyone, farmers, distributors, and of course, us consumers. And we saw how even small changes in one part of the market can have a big impact everywhere else.
But with all these numbers and trends, it's important to remember that this is not just some abstract concept. This is about real people, their livelihoods, and the food we eat.
Exactly. So, as we wrap things up, let's highlight the key takeaways for our listeners. What are those essential pieces of advice to help them navigate this unpredictable market?
Well, I think the key word here is adaptability. Being able to adjust, whether you're a farmer, a distributor, or just someone shopping for groceries. That's essential.
For producers, that means not relying on just one crop, maybe exploring new markets, and definitely paying attention to those regional differences to find opportunities. Don't put all your eggs in one basket, right?
Exactly. And for distributors, it's about streamlining those supply chains, being flexible with pricing, and taking advantage of those opportunities to move products between regions.
And for us consumers, it's about staying informed, being adventurous, and trying new things, and remembering that every time we buy something, we're supporting a certain kind of food system.
We also saw how looking at past data can be really helpful. By looking back at previous trends, we can start to see patterns and maybe even understand why things are changing the way they are.
It's like solving a puzzle. We use those past data points to make sense of what's happening now and maybe even get a glimpse of what might happen in the future.
We ended the last segment with a question that really got me thinking. We saw those prices for onions, broccoli, and Negro Yam go up, even though most prices were going down.
Right. Could this be a sign of something bigger? Are people starting to want healthier, locally grown food? Are they becoming more aware of their choices and how those choices affect the environment?
It's a great question. Is this just a temporary thing or the start of a whole new movement?
And if it is a sign of changing preferences, how will farmers and distributors adapt? Will we see a shift toward farming practices that are better for the environment? Will local markets become even more important for our communities?
So many exciting possibilities. This is a story that's still being written, and we're all part of it.
It really is. So as we wrap up our deep dive today, we encourage all of you to stay curious, keep exploring, and never stop asking those what-if questions.
Because the Jamaican agricultural market is more than just numbers and trends. It reflects our culture, our values, and our connection to the land.
Absolutely. And by understanding how it all works, we can all play a part in creating a future where our food system is stronger, more sustainable, and of course, more delicious. Thanks for joining us for another deep dive, and we'll see you next time.